Alright, in this video you see the whole restoration on this CJ, so let's get to it.
Alright guys, so this is my 1965 CJ5. This project started on September 15th, 2018, and you can see that it was pretty rough when we first got it. We got it for about $2,000 and it needed a little love. You could see the previous owner tried to paint it. The right fender's a little off color, but we do have some original parts with it, like the winch, the engine, transmission, a lot of the drivetrain actually, and the body, but you know, it's been changed here and there. As you can see some of the rust that's gone on. There's quite more than I originally thought, and a lot for being in the West Coast, or I mean mid to West Coast. This does have a Hurricane 4-cylinder with the T90 and a Dana 18 transfer case with an overdrive, as you can see that second one on the left. The shifter knob. It all started off with me just giving this a hose down, get all the old dirt off, because the previous owner, he only used it for hunting and going off-roading, so it was never really clean. So I just wanted to get most of the dirt off, because you know I'm probably going to be working on it, so I just wanted to clean it all up. I didn't get it all off, as you could see with some of the video, but it did just make it look a little bit better, get some of the grime out of it. I also decided to clean the inside because it was very dusty and dirty, as you can see. I also had a lot of leaves in there too, because you know, off-roading and hunting, it just ends up getting leaves from the trees. So I just gave that a quick pressure washing off, and then it was nice and shiny. So I took off the roll bar and I assessed what was underneath it, and you can see there's actually quite a bit of rust holes. They moved the roll bar around a little bit, so they patched up with some rivets. And over on this other side, they also riveted it in a plate that didn't look that good. So I eventually removed that. I don't think I showed it, but I did remove it. And then I also welded up some of these holes and took out the rivets. So I started off with putting in a fiberglass replacement for right there, and there was also another one on the other side. If I was to do this again, I probably would have just welded in a panel, but I used the self-adhesive body patch with some fiberglass Bondo. It did work, and it looks pretty good. I mean, you really can't tell that there is that piece there, but you know, I'd rather have solid metal instead of a fiberglass. And here is me putting it on. It looked pretty decent. I mean, it's very, you know, messy. I probably should have been wearing gloves, but it's very messy. I kind of just got it everywhere. I probably should have wiped it up too, but it turned out pretty well. I just had a little bit more work for myself than I actually needed. And this is what it ended up turning out looking like. You can see it's nice and smooth. There's a lot of scratches on the paint, but that wasn't that big of a deal to me because I knew we were going to paint it. There's a couple high spots on there, but for most part it's pretty smooth. I did end up banging those down and putting another layer of filler on it. And now here's me priming it. As you can see, I kind of got a lot of overspray. It doesn't look very good. Probably started sanding before it was completely dry. So yeah. So I took off the back tire hair holder, and I saw all this rust, which looks really bad. So I decided I wanted to weld in a plate there, which was probably a good idea. It also has that rail behind it that was also rusted through, so I decided to weld on one of those too. But here is me cutting it out. Lots of sparks, so it means I was cutting through good metal, not just rusty one, just so I can get rid of most of it. This was hard because, I mean, it's kind of weird with the light and all that, but I did eventually get it cut out. And here is me mocking up a piece. to weld in there and to cut. So, I mean, it went pretty well. It seemed like it fit really well. I didn't have that seam from the top, but that wasn't that big of a deal to me. And here's me cutting it out. So here's me welding it up. I just did a couple stick welds, and I only have a flux core welder from Harbor Freight. It works pretty well. I mean, it's not ideal, but you gotta use what you have. And it did get the job done, so I mean, it does look pretty good actually. And I guess I did not completely weld it up, but I decided to put a whole lot of Bondo on it instead. I probably should have welded it up, but I mean, it looks fine, so I was just gonna leave it there, I guess. But here is what it ended up finishing like. I did put a coat of primer over it afterwards, just so I can get some of that bare metal. Yep, here it goes. Kind of put quite a bit. Probably should have taped up too, but again, I was planning on painting this eventually. And that's how it ended up turning out. I believe I also did over on the other side, yep, as you can see there. That one I know I didn't use as much Bondo with, but I mean, still used quite a bit more than I should have. So I also ended up taking the fender's hood grill off the Jeep, and I'm sanding them here for painting or priming. I got most of it, and as you can see here, that's really what you wanted to get out, was those kind of rust spots, or I mean chip throughs. So I gave it a quick wipe down with some isopropyl alcohol, and then I sprayed it with that rust reformer stuff. I guess I already sprayed it down or wiped it down, but here's me spraying some of it on. Then yeah, it goes to me spraying pretty much any spot that went to bare metal. And here is me spraying the fender. This is the inside of the fender. I also did the outside of the fender and hood and grill too. So it eventually all ended up looking like that. So on this day, it was a big monumental day. We decided to take the body off, and I'm showing you how I labeled everything, just so I knew how to put everything back. But this was a very big day for us. We had no plan on actually taking the body off, but it eventually came off, and you can see that it's all snowy because it was middle of winter when we were doing this. But yeah, I got all the dash out, and the only thing we needed to take off was the steering wheel, because I had no clue how to, because it was really wedged on there. But I just ended up hitting it with a hammer because we were getting a new one anyway. And then there's also the wiring harness for it. Alright, and here was the body off. As you can see, it was very rusty, lots of rust holes, and lots of kind of cancerous rust too. Mostly in the front. The bed looked pretty good, but it was mostly in the front, as you can see with the body rails. So I ended up cutting out all that rust, most of the frame rails too, as you can see, and I welded in my own custom-made floor pan and body rails. Probably would have been a lot easier if I just would have bought one from, you know, someplace, but it was much cheaper just to do it this way, and you know, it ended up turning out fine, and it's on the bottom, you don't really see it anyway. So you can see here it all welded up. Looked pretty good. I still needed to paint it, and I mean mostly prime it, but it did look pretty good. So I ended up spraying a rubberized coating on the whole bottom. You can see how it turned out. It was nice black, and actually kind of held there pretty well, and it was just mostly to protect the bottom from rock chips and make it look a little better. As you can see, I'm just spraying the Rust-Oleum version of it. Probably would have been better if, you know, maybe I got like a paint one, like a monster liner or something, but it worked out perfectly fine. So on this day, I ended up deciding to strip all the paint off the Jeep, or the outside of the Jeep at least. And I was doing this when I was really cold, and I wasn't using like aircraft stripper. I was using just like a cheap one from Walmart that smelled good, because I didn't want to kill myself in there. But it ended up just not going too well because it was so cold that it couldn't really do anything, so I ended up just wire wheeling pretty much the whole thing off. I mean, it probably would have been smart to go get it media blasted, but didn't have the time for that, so I just ended up spraying that, and it turned out decent, but I probably could have done a better job on stripping the paint. And here's what most of it looked like when I stripped the paint off. I did have some paint, as you can still see, but it was pretty nice and smooth, so I wasn't really too worried about it. This side, actually, I left most of it because it was very hard to get off, but I ended up wire wheeling a lot. Then I ended up doing some body work, as you can see here. I'm not very good at it, so there was a lot of imperfections, but I mean, it ended up turning out fine. I mean, it's a Jeep, you're gonna smash it against a tree anyway, so it looked fine how it was. Alright, then I sprayed the whole body down with some primer. It looked pretty good. You know, body work could have been better, like I said, but I mean, after prime it was pretty good, and then I also wet sanded it after that too. And here's me sanding it down a little bit. I did take a little bit of time, but it did end up turning out pretty smooth, and it looked pretty nice. So this day was a big day for us. We ended up getting pretty much every single part spray or painted with this nice teal color that you're going to see in a little bit. It turned out really well. There is lots of orange peel because I am a novice at painting, but it actually ended up working really well and looking really good. And this is what the paint ended up looking like. As you can see, very nice, very clean. You know, the bodywork's still not the best with the paint on, probably even accentuates a little bit, but you can see how nice of that color is when it's in the sun. But I really enjoyed the colors, so I kind of felt like really relieved after this point because I didn't know how well it would have turned out. So I also put some of this Rust-Oleum truck bed liner on it. It turned out pretty well, and I just did it because I want it to be more durable and not as skiddish. So, you know, our feet actually kind of stick to it. It does track a little bit more dirt, but that was fine. I mean, I have a vacuum, but it just makes it more durable pretty much. So I did end up painting the whole inside the engine bay and underneath the hood, which is also underneath the engine bay. But it looked pretty good. I used a nice gloss black, and as you can see, like on the hood seal, some of the paint did peel off because I didn't sand too well. And this was our rig to lift the body back up onto the frame. It worked pretty well, but it was kind of janky, and we probably could have done it a better way, but it worked pretty well. So while the body was off, I did drain some of the fluids and added new ones. Most of the fluids were pretty old and gross, so you can kind of tell. The only one I didn't change till later was the engine oil because I wanted to heat up the engine first. I also put on some new parts such as a regulator, a thermostat, and a big one was the exhaust, as you don't see in this clip. But I also painted the frame while it was off to a nice black, and it turned it out very well. So here's us pulling the frame in. I did paint and put a couple of different parts on while it was off, and here is the body back on the frame. We ended up just drilling the mounting holes for the body while it was on because it actually just made it a lot easier instead of taking it on and off. I ended up wet sanding it a little bit, but not too much. I mean, there still is a lot of orange peel. If I was to do this again, I probably would have just gave it to a shop to let them paint it or do the body work and all that. But I mean, it ended up turning out just fine. It's still nice and shiny, and it glows in the sun, and people still look and stare at us. So I mean, it turned out quite well. And here is some of the parts going back on. As you can see, it looks pretty good. I mean, all together it looks really amazing. I really like how it looks, and it was just a matter of time before we got this all buttoned up and we can actually drive it again. So here was the dash and other interior components put back together. It looked really good. We didn't sand any of this or wet sand it because we didn't want it to just shine the sunlight right into our eyes, so we just kind of left it a little duller. But you can see most of the parts are in. I just needed to put on like the tire and the winch and a couple of things on the hood.
Alright guys, so you can see how it turned out. Turned out very nice, a nice tealish color. We even put the winch on. But this isn't the end of this Jeep. We still got many more projects, such as we're going to build a center console for it. We're going to build the roll cage and a rock slider or Nerf bar, whatever you want to call it. And we're even going to get either a soft top or a bikini top for it. And then maybe eventually we're going to even do a motor swap. But I'd like to thank you all for watching. This was an awesome project to do, and like I said, we're still not done. So if you wouldn't mind, please comment, rate, and subscribe to see more of the Jeep, more of different projects that I'm going to have in the future. I just kind of wanted to get this one, settled down first before I start on new ones. But thank you all for watching this, and if you want to see any bits of this restoration or the playlist in the description, so you can go check it out. So thank you all for watching. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.